Good afternoon, and welcome to our presentation of AR Fortress West Point. We are cadets Garrett, Gerstenfeld, and Tyson. Our presentation will begin with a brief history of Fort Meigs. We will then provide our problem statement, project vision, and the three critical components of our project. Before moving into our project design and a walkthrough of the prototype we created, we will explain the impact of the COVID-19 virus on our project. Finally, we will cover our design methodology and explore the potential of pairing augmented reality and history, as well as lessons learned from the process. Augmented Reality Fortress West Point focuses on using augmented reality at one of West Point's many historical fortresses, Fort Meigs. For today's visitors, the only remains of Fort Meigs are its stone wall, built into the side of a steep slope of earth. In order to understand the role augmented reality plays in enhancing one's learning experience at Fort Meigs, it is important to first provide a historical background of West Point and Fort Meigs as they pertain to the events of the Revolutionary War. The British strategy from the beginning of the war was to isolate New England from the rest of the colonies because they believed New England to be the source of colonial resistance. Because the British Navy dominated the Atlantic coast in the northeast, the lines of communication and supplies between the rebel forces in New England and the rest of the colonies ran through the Highlands and across the Hudson River. West Point became the critical location to achieve a defense of the Hudson River due to its location at the sharpest bend in the narrowest part and because it has the best views of the river. The sharp bend would force British ships sailing down the river to slow down in order to navigate the curve. To further impede British ships, Peter Townsend, manager of the Sterling Iron Works, constructed a bar iron chain, 2 1/4 inches thick, that would be strung across the river from West Point to Constitution Island. Not satisfied with the Great Chain being the only means of preventing British warships from traveling up the Hudson River, the Americans employed the Polish engineer Colonel Thaddeus Kosciuszko to design Fort Arnold and its accompanying batteries to fire on British warships on the river. With the defense of the Hudson River completed, the Americans feared that the British would move by land to strike Fort Arnold and destroy the Great Chain. They responded by constructing 3 fortresses, Fort Meigs being one of them, positioned along the ridgeline that ran parallel to the southerly approach to Fort Arnold. Not designed to fire on warships traveling the Hudson River, the fortifications were equipped with infantry and artillery to defend and deny enemy access to the ridgeline that would have provided an elevation advantage to British forces wanting to fire on Fort Arnold. In its present state, Fort Meigs does not resemble the way it appeared when it was used in the defense of Fort Arnold and the Great Chain at West Point during the Revolutionary War. As a result, it is difficult for site visitors to understand why the fort was constructed and the significance of its contribution to the fortress system and West Point. After analyzing our problem, we came to the solution that by utilizing the tools of augmented reality, we could create an application that utilizes 3D models paired with music, verbal, and written history in order to immerse the user in the time period of the Revolutionary War and visually demonstrate the strategic importance of Fort Meigs. The 3 focal points of our project are as follows: to illustrate and teach users the strategic importance of Fort Meigs, use augmented reality to transform the site to its Revolutionary War appearance, and create a feeling of connectedness between the app's users and the soldiers of the 6th Connecticut Regiment that defended the site. Our group determined these 3 components were critical to achieving our purpose of enhancing the historical learning experience of the application's users at West Point. We will explore these facets of our project in more detail as we guide you through the prototype. Impact of COVID-19. While our group knew that a lack of time and resources would limit our final product, there was no way for us to predict the outbreak of the COVID-19 virus. With West Point closing its doors and requiring its cadets to complete all classes virtually from their own homes, our group could no longer access the tools required to finish construction and deployment of the application. Furthermore, we were no longer able to conduct user testing and survey studies of the project. We had planned to use those studies to refine the app's ease of use and its effects on user learning. Faced with this unique challenge, we've decided instead to design a prototype for the app. The prototype includes all of the visual art assets that we had already completed, as well as others we could complete without physical access to Fort Meigs. Although we cannot deploy the coding for the app, we're able to replicate and annotate it so that the project can be completed more easily in the future. We will now guide you through the different aspects of our prototype.
One of the main goals for this project was to create a feeling of connectedness between the users and Colonel Meigs. In order to achieve this goal, we wanted to use AR to place Colonel Meigs in the user's surroundings. Although we had a Colonel's uniform from last year's project, we thought that adding Colonel Meigs' face into the uniform would better help the users connect with Colonel Meigs. Currently, the face placed into the uniform is a simple base face that can easily be built upon to have it resemble Colonel Meigs or other soldiers at Fort Meigs. When we began this project, one of the first things we did was construct a layout for the GUI. We did this early on because we did not want the interface to distract the user from the historical aspect of the app. The first screen is simply an opening screen for the app. If the app is being opened for the first time by the user, the next screen will be a tutorial screen. This screen briefly goes over how the user should interact with the app. After the tutorial screen, users are taken to the main screen. This screen originally had 3 buttons at the bottom: an art menu button, a map button, and an AR button. Originally, users would have to press the center button, the AR button, to view any scanned art assets. However, after rethinking this design, we decided it would be better if users were automatically taken to where they could view the art asset they had just scanned. Because of this, the center button is no longer incorporated into our final design. Once the user has scanned an app, brackets around the QR code will light up green to let the user know they have successfully scanned the app. For the final design, the QR code scanned by the user will automatically take them to the screen in which they can view the art asset. While viewing the art asset, the user has 3 options. They can click on the book button, which will take them to a screen where they can read more about the art assets they are viewing. The other option on the main viewing screen are a camera option, which will allow users to take pictures of the AR images they are viewing, and the final option is the back button in the upper left-hand side of the screen, which will bring users back to the main screen. The picture button on the main screen takes users to an image menu. This menu allows users to select different art assets that don't need to be put in a specific place. From this menu, users can choose to display Colonel Meigs' uniform, the soldiers' uniforms, or the musket used by soldiers at Fort Meigs. By clicking on one of the images, users are taken to a screen in which the AR art assets will be displayed for them.
I will now give a brief introduction to our prototype that we created to display our vision for the app. As discussed earlier, here's the entry screen that will present when users are loading into the app. Then they will be transitioned, if this is their first time, to the tutorial page, from which they can then press next and be introduced to this. As you can hear, once they come to the QR scanning page, they will automatically select one of the 5 music from the time period that we were able to acquire from the West Point band. This sets the user into the atmosphere and prepares them for our app. You can pause and resume the music by tapping the screen. Moving on, as we discussed, as it scans a QR code, it will be transitioned into whatever art asset is related to that QR code. They will then be able to, again, read more information about the art asset. They can also select one of the 3, whether they want to see the soldier's uniform, Colonel Meigs' uniform, or the weapons.
While Colonel Return Jonathan Meigs was a skilled battlefield tactician.
Again, audio will automatically begin playing once you see an art asset that will tell you information. These audio recordings are only approximately 2 minutes long. Any more information will be in the read section.
A visual learning experience. One aspect of our augmented reality application is providing a visual learning experience that allows for a deeper understanding of the history of Fort Meigs and West Point's defense system as a whole. While using the application, the user has the ability to examine several maps of the West Point fortification system. One map will be a modern-day representation, while another will be from the Revolutionary War period. This allows the user to better orient themselves at Fort Meigs compared to other locations at West Point. On both maps, Fort Meigs will be highlighted at all times to ensure the user is always aware of their current location. To educate the user on West Point's defense in-depth system, a British ship will spawn on the map, and an animation will move it up the Hudson River. When the ship reaches the Great Chain, it will stop and be fired upon by Fort Arnold and the other batteries by the river until it is destroyed. The symbol of a British infantry unit will then appear on the map and move up the southern access road towards Fort Arnold. Once the British unit reaches Fort Meigs, it will be fired upon and destroyed. Finally, a second British infantry symbol will appear on the map to the west of Fort Meigs. This unit will be destroyed by the redoubts that the Americans constructed to the west that protected Fort Meigs and the other forts that protected Fort Arnold. The purpose of the animation is to visually display to the user the methods in which the British would have attempted to control the Hudson River and the depth of the defense system that the Americans constructed at West Point to counter each avenue of approach that the British could have taken. Another feature that enhances the user's learning of Fort Meigs' role in the defense of Fort Arnold and the Great Chain are two icons that will be visible throughout the application's use. The icons will represent the location of Fort Arnold and the Great Chain. They are programmed using the compass on the user's smartphone or tablet so that the icon will always remain above the two locations. Above the icons will also be the distance to each location and the compass degree of direction. We believe that the map animation, paired with the compass feature, will provide the user a clearer understanding of the strategic importance of Fort Meigs and the role it played in West Point's defense system than a written explanation would. Taking the user back in time. Another advantage of using augmented reality that our project highlights is its enhancement of the user's overall experience by creating the feeling that the user has traveled back in time to the Revolutionary War. As the user approaches the site, they can hardly distinguish that it was once a military fortification. However, once the visitor takes out their smartphone or tablet and scans the QR code on a sign at the site, augmented reality takes over their experience. The first thing the user will most likely notice is the wooden parapet wall that spawns above the existing stone wall and covers the entire U shape of the fort. The users can maneuver around the fort and peer over the wooden wall that once protected Continental soldiers from British musket fire. Throughout the duration of its use, the application will play audio recordings of Revolutionary War period music to further enhance the user's immersion in the past. Augmented reality has thus provided the user with a unique learning experience in a way that writing, video media, and even virtual reality cannot. The user is able to physically walk in the same footsteps of the soldiers that they are learning about, while also being able to visualize what those same people saw when they defended Fort Meigs during the Revolutionary War, creating a connection. One of the most important aspects of teaching history is building a connection between the student and the people they are studying, and one of the best ways to achieve this connection is through storytelling. Because historians will not be the only people using our application, our project must also appeal to tourists and other groups of people that may not find history as exciting. We must thus focus on providing stories of the soldiers that defended the fort to captivate their interest in the history we are providing. Augmented reality will allow the application to spawn Colonel Meigs, the commander of the 6th Continental Regiment, for whom the fort is named, at the site. Colonel Meigs will then speak to the user through both audio and closed captioning to provide a brief history of the unit and describe the daily hardships the men faced while fighting for independence. The user will also have the opportunity to interact with an enlisted soldier from the regiment. The soldier will be dressed in the uniform the regiment wore during the Revolutionary War. He will also provide a description of his daily life and stories of times that Colonel Meigs worked to provide his soldiers with much-needed resources. The goal of this interaction is to impart on the user a feeling of sympathy for the soldiers and an appreciation for the sacrifices they made and hardships they endured. Furthermore, it intends for the user to recognize Colonel Meigs' leadership qualities as a model for West Point cadets and future officers in the United States Army to emulate. By providing audio dialogues and stories given to the application's users by representations of soldiers in the 6th Connecticut Regiment, we believe that augmented reality can create a feeling of connectedness between the user and the history we are presenting. Potential of AR in history. Although the COVID-19 virus inhibited the project from achieving its end goal, there are still positive lessons learned from this experience with augmented reality. From a historian's perspective, the most exciting lesson learned from the process was the potential that projects have for making new discoveries. Prior to my research of Fort Meigs and the 6th Connecticut Regiment that defended it, no one had made the connection that African American soldiers served in Colonel Meigs's regiment and therefore participated in the defense of West Point. The 6th Connecticut Regiment was unique compared to other Continental regiments, as it was one of the few that had African American soldiers fighting in its ranks. Fortunately, we have been able to find sources that provide stories of some of the soldiers that include why they enlisted in the unit, how they were treated by other members of the regiment, and what became of them after the war ended. Augmented reality also provides historians with an opportunity to pursue multidisciplinary projects. For a historical augmented reality project to be effective, it must be able to both teach and entice its audience. Lessons learned. The COVID-19 pandemic illustrates the limitations of augmented reality as a form of public history. Our app's effectiveness at providing an immersive historical learning experience requires users to visit Fort Meigs. Also, one of the most critical things I have learned from this project is how to communicate history to people that are not history majors or may not necessarily enjoy history. Working with a team of non-historians allowed me to realize what aspects of history people find most interesting. Using this experience, I decided to emphasize the storytelling aspect of the app because the story of the individual soldiers seems to be the most captivating part of history that the average person enjoys learning.
During this project, I learned how difficult it can be to work on interdisciplinary projects. It is very difficult to coordinate between different departments. It took me and my group a long time to realize that a high level of communication was required in order to make sure both departments were always on the same page. Although we did not get to conduct user testing for this project, the questionnaires have been set up so that testing can easily be done later. The testing for the project is split up into 2 parts. To test how much the users learn about Fort Meigs through the app, they will be given a knowledge survey, both before and after they use the app. This questionnaire consists of 5 multiple choice and true or false questions regarding the historical facts about Fort Meigs. The users will also be given a general survey after they finish interacting with the app. The general survey asks questions regarding the navigation and ease of use of the app, the audio and visual features of the app, and finally, the historical features. A majority of the questions are answered on a Likert scale, while a few others are either true or false or free response.